Every now and then, I want a meal that's going to be able to last me for a week or so. Something I can pull off of and, maybe put into the freezer and then warm it up in the oven. And pulled pork really meets that billing. So we're going to sit back and cook us some pulled pork today. This is a longer cook, so let's see what we can do here. We're going to use mustard as a binder. It doesn't really matter what you use, or even if you use anything. I've seen people use nothing, water, Worcestershire sauce, apple juice, hot sauce. I'm just using mustard because, it's cheap and, it's what I've always done before. And I've always gotten a pretty good bark when I've used it. On top of that, I'm going to use some of this rub from Oak Ridge Barbecue. Again, if you've seen some of my other videos, you know that these guys are no longer making rubs and spices. And so I have some that I'd like to use and just kind of go through. And so we're going to put that on, make sure we're going to get every single side of this pork shoulder. The fat cap, the meat side, the sides. We're just going to rub everything in and get this thing all decorated, looking pretty nice for the smoker. One of the great things about pulled pork is that it's got to be one of the lowest difficulty level type of cooks, at least in terms of preparation. I mean, you just get a big hunk of meat, you slather some kind of sauce and you season it, and that's it. There's not a lot of cutting, trimming, or anything like that you have to do. You're just kind of taking out the packet, and you could even just put it straight on the fire from here. There's not a lot to do, and you don't really have to worry about messing it up too much, which makes it really good as a first cook, or just something where you don't really want to have to fuss with a lot of stuff. So I'm excited for this cook, just to be able to kick back and enjoy, smoking some food today. That said, every cook I do try and challenge myself a little bit. And today, what I'm going to do is, go ahead and try and start this fire inside of the firebox. I'm going to take my lump charcoal, pour it in there, use my grill torch, and start that way. I haven't been able to do it as many times as I'd like to, and considering I've had this a little bit less than a year, I really want to move away from taking a chimney and dumping it inside and see if I can actually get this fire going inside of the pit and put wood on that way. And if I'm successful, these great coals will turn into a nice fire, and we can put some logs on top of that, and those logs are going to burn, break down, give us a coal bed, and all of a sudden, once we have that nice coal bed ready to go, we can put some real logs on there and actually start the cook process. And now the cook begins. Okay, and now for some truth serum. Here's my fireboard data. Just the temperature of my pit. You've got the light orange line is the actual ambient temperature inside the pit, and the dark orange is actually the meat. I'm giving you a little bit of foreshadowing here of how the cook goes. One of the important things is just making sure that you're progressing and getting better, and I really would like to narrow up these gaps over time. And why does it spike up? Well, that's when I put on a new log. Right now my fireboard is set up to go off when the temperature gets below 250 degrees, I believe. And so once the temperature drops below 250, I go ahead and put on a new log. And once you put on a new log or tinker with the fire a little bit, that's when the temperature will spike right back up. I think it's a little bit misleading to try and get this thing nailed down to within 5 degrees. When I had a master build, that's what you could do. You could just set that thing and let it run, and the temperature wouldn't move at all. Well, with an offset, there's some fluctuation. There's natural burning of wood. So, I'm just trying to see if I can narrow this gap a little bit, get a little bit better, tighten it up some. The food has come out amazing regardless of how things have gone. You can see at the very end of this cook, temperature went all the way up to 400 because I just put on a few pieces of firewood right there at the very end. But it was okay because I wanted the meat to finish up. I left this video up of the fire going inside the firebox intentionally. I just really like to look at it. It's one of the joys of having an offset smoker and just having a chance to sit and watch everything go for a little bit. All right, after about an hour into the cook, we're going to go ahead and check it out. I like to look after about an hour or so, let things settle down inside the chamber, and then just see if I need to make any adjustments to the meat, if there's anything that's going on that needs to be checked. And looks like we're getting some pretty good color here at our first inspection. I mean, everything's reddening up. Now at our second inspection, it's a little bit later on, we're actually getting a lot of color here. It's about 5 hours into the cook, actually. I tend to let it just sit inside the chamber and go for a bit, and it's doing really well. For my mop sauce, I'm just using like an apple cider vinegar plus, I think some white vinegar and some lemons and cayenne pepper. Just a little mixture of stuff you can find around the kitchen that might be able to add a little bit of moisture to it. Something I've cooked up, and maybe one day when I get brave, I might share my recipe here. But just something to kind of help the moisture stay on and maybe tenderize it a little bit. For the first time, I'm going to try and foil boat this pork shoulder. We often associate the foil boat with brisket, but I figure, why not try it with the pork shoulder? I like getting a little bit of crispiness on the top of the pulled pork when you're biting into it, getting those pieces and having a little bit of crispiness on the exterior bark. So I figured the foil boat method might work pretty well, and so I'm going to go ahead and use a method that they've shown on Chud's website, and also Mad Scientist Barbecue did a pretty good video just how they foil boated a lot of those different briskets, and figured that's a good way to try them for our pulled pork. So I'll do that today, and we'll see how it turns out. Once the pulled pork is done, and we know it's done when we can kind of put our thermometer through there and it goes through really, really nice. Temperature might tell us one thing. It might be in the high 190s, the low 200s. I kind of like the pork shoulder to kind of be in those upper, closer to, just in the low 200s, like 202, 203. But once we get there, we're going to go ahead and pull that off. And today we're going to let this rest for a few hours before we start playing around with it and shredding it. But it's time to go ahead and get this off the smoker. Our last step after it's all been said and done is to go ahead and pull this, shred this meat and get it going. The easiest way to start is to go ahead and pull the bone, see if you can find the bone, and that's one way that you've done a good job. If that bone comes off pretty easy, pretty clean, and this time I got a couple pieces of meat on there, but when I look at that bone, it's pretty well cleaned off. Did a good job there. But now it's simply just go ahead and pulling this meat. Now be careful when you do this. I have some cotton gloves under my exterior gloves, and that's giving me a little bit of heat resistance, but this stuff can be pretty hot. So depending on when you're pulling this, make sure you bring some protection or use a fork or something when you're shredding this meat, because otherwise you might end up with some burnt fingertips, or that you've got some desensitized fingertips, one way or the other. But I was really impressed with the way this turned out. The flavor was very good, meaning it's juicy, not too salty. That rub from Oak Ridge Barbecue did phenomenal. Smoke level was just right. Even though it had those peaks and valleys in the cook, it still turned out excellent with the final product. And that's one of the great things about pulled pork. There's so much fat in it. There's so much forgiveness in your cook process, so that you can make those mistakes. You can, not have the perfect, pristine cook and it still turn out great. And the people that eat your meat, eat the food, are going to feel like, wow, this guy really knows what they're doing. So another great cook here. Really glad for being able to do this, and the folks that I cooked this for were really appreciative. So, another great time, and I hope everybody comes and joins on next time. Thanks. Well,
You made it to the end. You might make it to the end of another one of my videos. Why don't you check one of those out below? Take it easy.